Dhruva from uh, Lumiere, and Dhruva got into Harvard, and he's going to share his experience of how he got into Harvard. So, hello, Dhruva. It's a pleasure having you here today. Let's get going. And why don't you start off by telling us a little bit about yourself, about which school you were from, and about your journey to Harvard.
Of course. Can I check that you guys can hear me fine?
Perfect.
Awesome. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. And Devish, I know you've been doing a marathon of these. So congratulations on continuing to have a smile on your face and the energy in your voice. And hopefully I can match that despite this being my first one of the day. But really nice to see all of you here. A bit of background about myself is my name is Dhruva, as you guys know. I grew up in Chennai. So I was born in Chennai, grew up there. And I went to the same CBSE school from when I was in pre-KG all the way to 12th grade. So it was a school called PS Senior Secondary School in Mylapore, a neighborhood in Chennai. And had a great time there. I picked commerce in 11th and 12th. So I had business studies, accountancy, maths, English, and economics. Um, and the and to be honest, it wasn't much of a trend from my school to apply to universities abroad. Students went to very good schools in India. A lot of them then went on to do masters and PhDs in the US. But very few people, in my graduating class of 250, I think maybe 3 or 4 people went abroad for their undergrad. And so it was definitely something that I wasn't familiar with. And the way I came to it was because I did a lot of competitive debating. So if you guys have heard of this organization called the Indian Schools Debating Society, they're the nonprofit organization that selects and trains the Indian national debating team to compete at the World Schools Debating Championships. So I was very lucky in that the coach of the national team came to our school to do an info session when I was in the 8th, 9th grade, and I fell absolutely in love with it. And I dove into debating, really enjoyed doing it, and was lucky to be selected onto the national team in my 10th, 11th, and 12th grades. And so I represented the country in those years. And that totally opened up my horizons in a way that I never had before, because all of a sudden I was going to this international competition, meeting students who were, flying straight from the World Championships to Yale and Penn and NYU, and that got me really, really excited, because for me, the U.S. Education system had always had a bit of a draw, because I was never sure what I wanted to study. I thought maybe law, maybe economics, maybe political science, maybe English. Really unsure what I wanted to do in undergrad. And so the idea of a liberal arts system where I could explore and then choose my subject really appealed to me. And when I realized that it was possible for me to do that as an undergrad, um, decided I'd give it a shot and apply. And so ended up applying, got into Harvard, where I did my undergrad degree in economics. Thankfully, I got full need-based financial aid, which is what made it possible for me to go to Harvard. Had a fantastic 4 years there, and then continued to do my master's, and I'm now doing my PhD at Oxford alongside running Lumiere, which is a research program for high school students.
Superb, Dhruva. All those who are just joining us, we have with us Dhruva Bhat, who got into Harvard and is now sharing with us his application journey, about his extracurricular activities, about his common app essay, and things like that. So, Dhruva, my next question to you is, what did you study at Harvard, and why that major?
Yeah, so I did economics at Harvard. And so in my first year, I explored a bunch of different areas, but they were all oriented around the same thing, which is I was really curious about how human society functioned and how humans engaged with each other in different sorts of institutions. And so in my first year, I took courses in different fields that spoke to that. So I took a course in economics, I took some courses in political science, I took a course in religion, I took a course in law. And the idea with all of these was that I was trying to understand which approach of studying society was I most interested by. And at that point in my sort of intellectual trajectory, I loved the fact that economics used quantitative data and analyzed it in a way that could give us sort of objective causal answers to the questions I had. And so I loved the approach that economics had to research and to answering questions about the world. And so I dove into that for the remaining 3 years of undergrad. I now do more I mix economics with anthropology and other subjects, but my undergrad was economics with some math and some German thrown in as well.
Okay. Dhruv, which other colleges did you apply to when you were in grade 12, and then why did you decide to go to Harvard?
Yeah. So I basically applied to colleges where I thought I had a shot of getting need-based financial aid. And internet and a lot of universities are need aware for international students, which means that if you apply for financial aid, your chances of getting in are lower. And so I applied to the universities which weren't at the time, which was Harvard, Yale, Princeton, and Amherst. As well as I applied to the other Ivies because I figured, they have the most money. If anyone's going to give me financial aid, it's them. And then I applied to Emory University in Atlanta and Carleton University in Minnesota as well, because both of them had scholarships that were aimed at debaters in specific. And so I sent in all of these applications. I got my first letter back was from Carleton University about a week before the Ivies were due, and I got a rejection, and I was absolutely devastated and thinking, if I didn't get into Carleton, which is great, but not as selective as the Ivies, my chances were all gone. And so then as Ivy Day approached, I'd actually decided that I wouldn't check my results because Ivy Day was the day before my final board exam, my economics board exam. And I figured, if I got in, I would be super happy and I wouldn't study for my exam. And if I didn't get in, I would be really sad and I wouldn't study for my exam. So I decided I'm just not going to check. I've waited this long. I can wait 24 more hours and get it. But the issue is that I hadn't realized that my Gmail was connected to my phone. And so the morning of Ivy Day, I got these notifications, and one of the emails I think had the word congratulations or something like that in the title or in the body of the message. And so I ended up opening it, discovered that I'd gotten into Harvard, and just the house exploded. And what then happened, and this is, I think, worth mentioning, is I got into Harvard and I got into Amherst, but I didn't get into any one of the other Ivy League universities that I applied to. So I didn't get into Cornell, didn't get into Brown, didn't get into Dartmouth. And I think that goes to show that the best you can do is put together a really strong and compelling application and turn it in. But at the end of the day, there is a large element of sort of luck and arbitrariness in this entire process. And you've just got to accept that and know that wherever you end up going, whether that's in the US or abroad, you're likely to have a fantastic experience. And I think that's just something that I always like to flag to make it clear that I'm not some sort of superstar superhero who got in everywhere he applied, but rather someone in whose journey luck played a pretty significant role.
Awesome, Dhruva. My next question to you is, if you could tell us a little bit about your high school grades and your test scores.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie, my high school grades were very good. I was sort of consistently in the top 5 students in the class, consistently 90 above in the subjects I took in high school, and I think that definitely helped. I was yeah, so I think that helped. In terms of tests, I did the SATs, and back then it was out of 2400, and I got a 2310, which I think was decent and made me competitive for the universities I was applying to. And I did 3 of the SAT subject tests. So I did the SAT subject test in math, the second level one. I did the SAT subject test in literature, and I did the SAT subject test in German. And those were the only 3 subject tests I was qualified for because as a commerce student, I hadn't done any of the STEM subjects which are available. And as the as a non-humanity student, I hadn't done history and so on. I genuinely wasn't aware of the APs or didn't know that was even an option. Looking back, I think I definitely would have benefited from doing them, but it was both not on my mind, and even if I thought about it, I would have probably said it's too expensive. I'm not going to do it. So my tests were just the SATs and the SAT subject tests.
Okay. And how about your extracurricular activities? You briefly mentioned that you were a lot into debates. So do elaborate on that, and what else did you do?
Yeah, of course. So I'll say I think my 3 biggest extracurricular activities were definitely debating, which took up a ton of my time. I was on the national team. The second was I basically learned I took German language classes outside of school at the Goethe Institute, what's called Max Muller Bhavan in India. And I did it up to the B1 or B2 level, which is sort of the third or fourth highest level. Um, and through that, I'd gotten the opportunity to go once to a language camp in Germany on a funded trip, and a second time to represent India at the International German Olympiad. Which, if you're familiar with the International Math Olympiad or the Physics Olympiad, the German Olympiad is similar, just a lot less competitive and a lot less sort of intense compared to these other Olympiads. So I did the International German Olympiad and I got a bronze medal there. And I think that was my second big extracurricular activity. And my final thing was just student government. So I was school pupil leader of the school, which is the equivalent of head boy. And I think those were my three big extracurricular activities outside of schoolwork.
Okay, wonderful. And do you remember what did you write on your Common App essay?
Shockingly, in line with the rest of my story, it was about debating, and I just talked about sort of the intellectual and personal journey that debating had taken me through. Um, Looking back, I think it was a very conventional essay, and I probably would have benefited from doing something a little bit less common, because debating is such a common activity that people applying to top universities do, and I can definitely see that my essay would not have been that different to the essays of lots of students applying. So looking back, I definitely would have done something a bit different, but that's the Common App essay I went with.
Okay. Dhruva, would you like to share about who would be a good fit or who would not be a good fit uh, at Harvard?
Yeah. I absolutely loved my time at Harvard. And I think people think of places like Harvard as being incredibly competitive and scary. I don't think that's true. I think I found people to be super friendly, super supportive, and the kind of people who recognize that the way you get ahead is not through trying to pull each other down, but by contributing and collaborating and figuring out how you can work together best in order to achieve the objectives that you have. So it was never an instance where if I had a piece of homework due, there'd be other people who would be trying to do the homework and hide it from me. Rather, we would be all sitting in the dining hall together, talking through our approach and helping each other out with questions and so on. So definitely, I wanted to dispel that. The other thing I wanted to dispel is this idea that professors are sort of distant and really hard to access because they're focused on their research. Absolutely to the contrary, I found that the professors were, if you reached out to them, super, super engaging, super excited to work with you and talk to you. Because at the end of the day, the reason that they do this job is because they love students and they love teaching and they love mentorship. So both of those, I'd say, are not quite true. And it's worth pointing that out before moving into everything else. In terms of who would do well at Harvard, I think the first is that you do need, and I'm trying to say this without coming across as sort of arrogant, but you do need a sense of excellence in what you're doing. So sort of really good grades. All of my friends in undergrad had strong grades, had strong academics, and had really powerful sort of spikes in their extracurricular activities, or really compelling stories that explained why they didn't have the same sorts of achievements that others did. So I think that's definitely something that's important. And so those extracurricular activities could be debating, it could be music, it could be research, which a lot of my friends in college had done, all sorts of things like that. The second thing that I think you should look out for is also on the flip side of that is whatever you think you're good at, there's probably somebody in your class who's better than you at it. That's just the truth of a place like Harvard is, if you think that you're a good musician, there's someone who's played to a packed auditorium at Carnegie Hall. If you think that you're a good debater, as I did, you go there and the first and second best speakers from the world were in my class at Harvard. So it's just, you've got to go in with a sense of humility and a sense of knowing I'm going to be in a pool with other incredible people, and that's going to cause me to sort of compare myself sometimes to other people, feel stressed out about whether I'm doing enough. But I need to keep those feelings in check and recognize the incredibleness of the place around me and the people around me, and benefit from it. So that's the second word of sort of um, and which kind of person would be a good fit. Um, Certainly, I think in terms of who wouldn't be a good fit, I don't know if there's any specific characteristic I would point out. It's definitely a mid-sized university, so it's sort of a class of 1,600 people, which is smaller than a lot of the public universities, which are tens of thousands of people, but bigger than a small liberal arts college like Williams or Amherst or one of those universities for sure. Um, it's also, I would say, not for people who are worried about the cold. Boston can get very, very cold, and it can snow all the way up till April or May. And so, if you're worried about that and you prefer the warmth, stay on the West Coast. Don't come to Harvard. Um, and finally, it does require, I think, a bit of confidence in yourself and in your abilities to navigate. And so, it's fine if you don't have that. You'll learn it at Harvard, but it's just something that I think would make your experience at the university a lot better.
Awesome. That's really a great piece of advice, Dhruva. And we are almost coming towards the end of this session. But before we close, Dhruva, do share any final piece of advice you have for these students who are considering Harvard or who might be working on their Harvard applications in the next few months.
Of course. So I think that constructing your high school experience around getting into Harvard is a recipe for disaster because, um, it's one of those incredibly selective schools that, like I mentioned earlier, there's a great deal of luck into whether you get into it or not. What I would rather encourage you to do by far is do the things that you enjoy and that you're good at, and really dive into those areas and put in as much time and effort and energy as you can into those areas and become as good at them as you can. And that effort and that energy and that passion, I think, will speak for itself when it comes to college applications. And then once you've sent in the applications, um, know that there's a lot of luck and a lot of fingers crossing in the equation, and know that whichever university you end up going to, whether that's Harvard or elsewhere, it's going to be an incredible experience and a great 4 years of your life.
Superb. Thank you so much, Dhruva, for your time on this call today and for sharing about your journey, about your extracurricular activities, about everything. And of course, it's a so Lumiere Research Scholar Program is a Next Genius webinars partner, and Dhruva runs an amazing research program. And I would encourage all of you to check out Lumiere Research. Maybe Dhruva, you can just put the link to your website on the chat. And I can see that there are a lot of questions which are coming in. So Dhruva, I would just request you if you could stay back for a while and just answer these questions, type in your answer for these questions. And once again, thank you so much for joining this call today. It was a pleasure speaking with you.
It was wonderful. Good luck to all of you. And yes, I can spend the next few minutes answering questions and then drop off. Thank you, Devesh.
Thank you, Dhruva.